In the final period of the Second World War, communication lines across many sectors of the European front were under constant strain. Radio interference, damaged telegraph lines, disrupted courier routes, and shifting front lines forced military units to rely on older methods of communication that had once seemed outdated. Among these methods, the use of trained messenger pigeons unexpectedly regained importance. Although such birds were viewed as auxiliary tools rather than primary assets, they often reached destinations when human couriers or radio operators could not. In one of the rear command posts located near a forested region that had recently experienced heavy troop movements, the routine monitoring of incoming messages was suddenly interrupted by the arrival of a messenger pigeon, whose presence was not recorded in any recent dispatch schedules. The bird showed signs of exhaustion, indicating a long flight through difficult conditions. Its feathers were dusted with debris that suggested it had traveled through areas impacted by artillery or aerial bombardment. The officers responsible for message intake noted the irregularity immediately, since unauthorized or unscheduled dispatches were rare within their system. Upon retrieving the small metal container attached to the bird's leg, the personnel discovered a folded message written in concise, coded phrasing. The document did not match the formats used by neighboring units. In its basic interpretation, the message contained coordinates and brief descriptions of terrain features that did not correspond to any mapped positions that the staff had been briefed on. The origins of the message were unclear, as the identification tag on the pigeon was partially damaged and did not correspond to the lists maintained at the command post. Initial assumptions included the possibility that the message belonged to an isolated unit attempting to re-establish contact with higher command. However, the lack of recognizable call signs created uncertainty. The coordinates specified in the message described a location approximately 20 kilometers north of where any active friendly formations were believed to be operating at that time. This distance, combined with the absence of supporting intelligence, led officers to treat the document with caution. Even so, the significance of the information could not be dismissed, since the area described lay near supply routes that had recently been the focus of enemy reconnaissance activity. The region referenced in the message contained a combination of dense woodland, abandoned farm structures, and partially flooded lowlands near a minor river. Earlier reports from scouts had indicated limited movement there, but nothing to suggest the presence of a military force. For months, this part of the sector had been viewed as strategically unimportant. If the coordinates in the note were accurate, it would imply the presence of an entire battalion-sized element situated in an area previously believed to be empty. The command staff convened a brief evaluation, referencing older reconnaissance maps that had not been updated due to operational pressures elsewhere. The maps indicated that the region contained concealed terrain depressions, remnants of older logging sites, and several paths no longer marked for active use. These features could theoretically allow a large formation to remain undetected if properly supplied and positioned. Still, the idea that such a force had remained hidden without the knowledge of higher command seemed improbable. Yet the very improbability of the situation forced the officers to consider that the message might reveal an oversight in their situational awareness. The pigeon's unexpected arrival itself held implications. Birds used for military communication were trained to follow specific routes between predetermined points. For a bird to arrive at a command post it was not assigned to suggested that its original destination had been compromised or that the unit responsible for dispatching it had been cut off. The physical condition of the bird further implied a journey through hostile conditions. The possibility arose that the message had been intended for a different headquarters, but reached this one as a result of disrupted flight patterns. As the staff continued to analyze the contents of the message, additional small details stood out. The handwriting style differed from the formats normally associated with field officers. The phrasing suggested urgency, but not panic, implying that the sender had attempted to maintain clarity despite potential danger. The coordinates repeated twice within the short text, reducing the likelihood of transcription error. The message appeared to request recognition of the unit's position rather than resupply or extraction, which raised more questions about the battalion's circumstances. Efforts to cross-reference the information with available intelligence reports produced inconclusive results. Several small detachments operating on the periphery of the sector had gone silent in recent weeks, but none of them matched the approximate size implied by the message. Moreover, the described location did not align with the most probable retreat paths of any known units. This contradiction deepened the sense of uncertainty in the command post. The officers responsible for field operations recognized that ignoring the message carried significant risks, while acting upon it would require allocating reconnaissance resources that were already stretched thin. Despite the ambiguity, the arrival of an unscheduled military pigeon carrying coordinates of unknown origin represented an anomaly that could not simply be dismissed. The possibility that the note referred to friendly forces in distress remained strong enough to justify further investigation. As dusk approached, the command staff prepared preliminary plans to verify the situation by sending a small scouting detachment to the region indicated in the message. None of them yet understood that the information carried by the exhausted bird would reveal the existence of a concealed battalion whose presence had gone unnoticed for far longer than anyone had believed possible. In the hours following the release of the Pigeon, the unit responsible for managing field communications continued operating under strict wartime routines. Reports from multiple sectors were being processed, encoded, and forwarded to higher command. The atmosphere inside the temporary command post reflected the difficult circumstances created by disrupted radio links and unreliable telegraph lines. The personnel prioritized messages according to urgency and attempted to maintain continuity of communication despite the constant interference caused by artillery, weather conditions, and damaged infrastructure. During one of the routine inspections of incoming pigeon carriers, a corporal noted the arrival of a bird that did not match the expected schedule. The Pigeon carried a message capsule that appeared identical to standard equipment, but the serial number indicated that it belonged to a distant reconnaissance post positioned well outside current communication patterns. The corporal documented the anomaly and passed the capsule to decoding staff, who operated under the assumption that any message received during this period might contain time-sensitive information. The process of decoding began without expectation of unusual content. However, the first lines of the transcription referenced troop concentrations in an area officially regarded as inactive. The report described movements of infantry and support units concealed in a forested valley located outside planned operational routes. The wording suggested that the reconnaissance team had observed an entire battalion positioned in a manner inconsistent with the established frontline configuration. No reports from adjacent sectors had indicated similar activity. The decoding personnel paused to review the transcription for possible errors. They rechecked the cipher key, verified the alignment of letter groups, and compared the decoded text with standard patterns. The content remained unchanged. A concealed formation had been identified in a zone assumed safe for logistical traffic. The discovery contradicted previous intelligence estimates and raised immediate questions about the movement of enemy forces and the reliability of earlier reconnaissance data. The message was transferred to senior officers who evaluated the information against available maps. The indicated valley lay close to a supply route previously considered secondary in strategic importance. The presence of a hidden battalion in that location created potential risk for transport columns and isolated detachments. The officers noted that recent delays in supply convoys and irregular reports of distant artillery fire might have been indirect signs of this concealed deployment. Efforts were made to confirm the message using alternative channels. Attempts to reach the reconnaissance post by radio produced no results. Patrol units dispatched to nearby sectors reported no unusual activity, but also lacked visibility into the specific valley mentioned in the message. Weather conditions and terrain characteristics complicated aerial confirmation. Command had to decide whether to treat the Pigeon message as reliable intelligence or categorize it as either outdated or possibly misleading. The officers evaluating the situation recognized that the use of pigeons was often reserved for moments when conventional communication systems had failed. The arrival of an unexpected message implied that the reconnaissance team had encountered circumstances preventing them from transmitting through regular channels. This consideration increased the likelihood that the information was recent and possibly critical. The message was analyzed once more to identify smaller details. References to camouflaged equipment, improvised shelters, and limited smoke signatures suggested that the battalion was intentionally avoiding detection. The pattern corresponded to defensive preparations rather than active maneuvering. If accurate, the enemy formation could be preparing to intercept movements along the nearby supply corridor or to protect a retreating division, regrouping deeper in hostile territory. As the implications became clearer, the officers drafted a preliminary assessment for higher command. The communication emphasized the potential threat to supply infrastructure and the need for immediate reconnaissance across the valley. It also urged caution for any convoy movement through the region until the situation could be clarified. Although the information remained unconfirmed, the decision was made to elevate the alert level for units operating in the area. Field commanders received instructions to adjust march routes where possible and to reinforce security at vulnerable points. The Pigeon message had begun influencing operational planning even before verification, illustrating the degree to which unconventional communication could alter battlefield expectations. What remained unknown to the officers at that moment was the origin of the message's timing and the conditions under which the reconnaissance team had released the Pigeon. The absence of follow-up contact created a gap in the narrative that would only deepen in the hours ahead. For now, the decoded report functioned as a single piece of intelligence that challenged established assumptions and forced reconsideration of operational safety in a sector previously regarded as stable. As intelligence officers continued to analyze the Pigeon message and the circumstances surrounding its discovery, a more complex picture of the situation began to emerge. What initially seemed to be a single unexpected clue gradually transformed into a broader indication that enemy activity in the sector had been underestimated. The message confirmed the existence of a hidden battalion, but the trails uncovered during the following hours revealed that the concentration of forces in the nearby forested region was larger than previously assumed. Reconnaissance aircraft were sent to review the sector marked on the decoded note. Photographs taken from moderate altitude showed irregular clearings that did not correspond to natural terrain patterns. Several tree lines displayed sharp geometric borders, suggesting recent human intervention. Roads that had been marked on older maps as unused appeared more compacted, which implied regular passage of heavy vehicles. None of these elements were conclusive by themselves, yet together they suggested that the enemy had transformed the region into a concealed transit zone. Patrol units dispatched into the area confirmed additional anomalies. Bridges that had previously been considered unusable showed signs of improvised reinforcement. A number of supply crates bearing recent markings were found hidden under camouflage netting near a stream bed. Local inhabitants, interviewed under standard wartime protocols, reported hearing the sound of engines at irregular intervals during the night in the preceding weeks, although no convoys had been observed on open roads. These testimonies aligned with the suspicion that movement was taking place along forest corridors intentionally kept out of sight. The hidden battalion indicated in the Pigeon's message appeared to be only part of a larger formation. Analysts identified discrepancies in enemy radio transmissions that, when re-examined, pointed to the temporary silence of several units. Such gaps could occur during redeployment or technical failure, but the timing and duration suggested deliberate radio discipline meant to mask coordinated relocation. The Pigeon message had effectively pointed to a single node in what was likely a broader concealed network. Terrain analysis continued in parallel. The region was composed of mixed woodlands, swamp patches, and narrow elevations that provided natural cover for troop movement. Military planners realized that if the hidden formation succeeded in establishing itself along the route suggested by the message, it could threaten supply arteries that were essential for maintaining the stability of the front. The risk was not immediate, but the potential impact demanded rapid action. Field commanders considered options for adjusting defensive positions. Establishing observation posts along the outer perimeter of the forest became a priority. Engineering units prepared to place obstacles along likely exit routes. At the same time, reinforcements were positioned at key junctions to prevent sudden breakthroughs. These measures were preventive rather than reactive, as no direct confrontation had yet occurred, but the situation required preparation for a shift that could develop without warning. Meanwhile, the message itself continued to be studied. The handwriting, paper quality, and abbreviations used in the note suggested it had been produced by a mid-level officer trained in standard field communication. This implied that the message had not been an improvisation but part of a structured information chain. Investigators reconstructed the probable path of the Pigeon, estimating its point of release using wind direction, recent weather patterns, and typical flight ranges. The data pointed to a forest sector located deeper behind enemy lines, further supporting the hypothesis of a concealed command post. The chain of events initiated by the bird's unexpected landing had now affected operational planning across several nearby units. Communications headquarters introduced new guidelines for monitoring possible animal-borne messages, even though such cases were rare. The airborne reconnaissance timetable was temporarily intensified. Ground patrols were assigned expanded sectors, and logistic units were instructed to prepare for potential redeployment if the situation escalated. Although there were still no confirmed visual reports of the hidden battalion itself, the alignment of indirect evidence left little doubt among analysts that an undeclared concentration of enemy forces existed nearby. The Pigeon message had become the focal point of a widening investigation that influenced decisions far beyond its original significance. What began as an isolated note lodged in a metal cylinder now shaped the posture of multiple units preparing for a possible shift in enemy strategy. The personnel involved in the analysis recognized that the full consequences of this discovery would likely unfold in the days ahead. For the moment, they concentrated on gathering more information and maintaining vigilance. The forested region toward which the investigation now pointed remained quiet, yet the stillness appeared increasingly deceptive. The quiet terrain hid patterns that had only become visible because of an unforeseen event. A bird diverted from its route, and the message it carried. As the decrypted Pigeon message circulated through the command post, a rapid reassessment of the regional situation began. The information described an entire battalion concealed inside a forested ravine that aerial reconnaissance had repeatedly classified as empty terrain. The battalion's position, its estimated strength, and its supply shortages contradicted all available intelligence reports. Analysts realized that earlier assumptions about enemy retreat patterns in this sector had been incomplete or incorrect. The new message forced the staff to reconsider the distribution of friendly units across several adjacent zones. Radio operators attempted to verify the report by contacting nearby patrols, but communication in this region remained inconsistent. Broken signals, static interference, and incomplete responses suggested that the terrain was interfering with transmissions. Because of this, the Pigeon message became the most reliable form of confirmation. The officers recognized this unlikely situation as a result of shifting front lines, disrupted infrastructure, and the unpredictable flow of information that defined late-war operations. The decision to send reconnaissance teams into the ravine was made quickly. Their objective was to locate the battalion, evaluate its condition, and determine whether it was still capable of coordinated action. Initial movement through the area confirmed signs of long-term occupation, including dugouts, camouflaged storage pits, and improvised defensive positions. These details aligned closely with the information carried by the Pigeon. The battalion had evidently remained isolated for an extended period, relying on minimal supplies while avoiding detection by both their own command and enemy forces. When the reconnaissance teams reached the heart of the ravine, they found multiple clusters of personnel, all exhausted but operational. The isolation of this battalion stemmed from a chain of communication failures triggered by earlier bombardments and disrupted transport routes. Cut off from reinforcements, the unit had chosen to remain hidden within the terrain rather than attempt a risky relocation. The Pigeon message, sent as a last attempt to reach friendly command, had finally revealed their position after weeks of uncertainty. Once contact was re-established, logistical units were assigned to deliver medical aid, rations, and ammunition to the battalion. Their hidden position had prevented casualties from rising even higher, but the effects of prolonged shortage were visible. Commanders used the updated information to reorganize several operational plans across the sector. The sudden reappearance of an entire battalion carried significant strategic implications, restoring manpower to an area that had been considered undermanned. As support groups and communication specialists integrated the battalion back into the broader operational structure, analysts reflected on the unusual role played by the Pigeon message. Despite the era's increasing reliance on radio and wired communication, this simple method had succeeded where modern networks had failed. The event highlighted the fragile nature of wartime information systems and demonstrated how unconventional channels could still alter the course of deployment decisions. In the following days, the battalion was redistributed to reinforce critical points that had previously lacked sufficient personnel. This redistribution stabilized the sector and allowed commanders to resume planned defensive preparations. Reports documenting the incident were circulated among higher headquarters, emphasizing the need to maintain diverse communication options under complex frontline conditions. The story of the message and the hidden battalion soon became a point of analysis within the intelligence community. It illustrated how terrain, disrupted infrastructure, and fragmented command structures could create pockets of isolated forces, and how small factors could determine whether such pockets remained undiscovered or became reintegrated into the broader war effort. For the personnel involved, it served as a reminder that outcomes sometimes hinged on unexpected details. By the time the battalion was fully reabsorbed into the front, the extraordinary circumstances surrounding its rediscovery were already being recorded as an operational anomaly. The Pigeon message that had traveled across contested territory against the odds had redirected planning at a crucial moment. In a conflict defined by vast movements and large-scale operations, a single small dispatch had uncovered a force that many had assumed was lost.